The title of this story is What's the Problem with Gretel? A story about commitment by Joe Ritigliano, illustrated by Joe Ritigliano and Gary Balzano. It's easy for people to lose interest in someone when things don't seem to be working right. See what happens in this story to a tea kettle that knows just how that feels. This book is dedicated to those who have modeled commitment to me in their everyday lives. Gretel the kettle was tired of being up on the shelf of the second-hand thrift shop, but she knew this is where she probably belonged. You see, the reason she was here was because someone would buy Gretel and take her home. But while trying to heat up some water for tea, a problem arose. Disgusted, they would return it to the thrift shop instead of dealing with her problem. One day, Miss Wilson came into the store. She was a kind old lady who would stop in the thrift shop from time to time to see if she could find a bargain. As she was browsing around, her eyes happened to glance up at the shelf where Gretel was. Miss Wilson walked over and took her down for a closer look. Admiring the tea kettle's beauty, she said, "This is the loveliest tea kettle I have ever seen." So without hesitation, Miss Wilson paid the man at the counter. Thinking as she was leaving how Gretel would brighten up her kitchen. Now you would think this would have made Gretel glad to find a new home, but it didn't. She had been through this many times before. Gretel knew that when Miss Wilson discovered her problem, she would be returned, and once again end up on the shelf of that second-hand thrift shop. When Miss Wilson arrived home with her new tea kettle, she was very excited to show someone. So she called up her next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson, and invited him over for a cup of tea and some homemade cookies. Mr. Thompson accepted the invitation, knowing how good Miss Wilson's cookies were, and said he would be over in a little while. Miss Wilson gave Gretel a good scrubbing and rinsed her off. She then filled her with water and put her on the stove. But while Miss Wilson was setting the table, she noticed something unusual happening. Gretel's lid was beginning to bounce and rock, sending water all over the stove. Miss Wilson quickly turned the stove off and wondered what could have caused this problem. Just then there was a knock at the door from her neighbor, Mr. Thompson. Miss Wilson let him in and began to explain what happened once the water began to boil. Mr. Thompson saw the concerned look on Miss Wilson's face, so he offered to take a look and see if he could find out what caused the problem. After carefully examining the pot from top to bottom, Mr. Thompson took the whistle plug out of Gretel's spout. Holding it up to the light, he noticed something. He reached into his pocket and took out one of his pipe cleaners. Then, pushing it into each hole of the whistle plug, he forced out some dirt. Holding it up to the light again, he could see the holes were clear. He then asked Miss Wilson to heat up another pot of water. She did, hoping Mr. Thompson had found the problem. In a short time, the wonderful sound of a gentle whistle rang like music throughout the house. Everyone was wearing a smile. Miss Wilson said, "Now I can enjoy my lovely tea kettle." Mr. Thompson added, "And now I can enjoy your tasty homemade cookies." Oh, and Gretel, who was also smiling, thought to herself, "Now I can enjoy my new home permanently." Later, while they were having their tea and cookies, Miss Wilson shared with Mr. Thompson how glad she was that he was able to fix Gretel. Mr. Thompson said, "That's probably why that nice-looking kettle ended up in the second-hand store. No one wanted to deal with its problem. It was easier for them to return it. I saw how important the kettle was to you. You could tell you weren't going to let it go so easily." "That's right," Miss Wilson said. "If you care about someone or something, you don't give up so easily, no matter what the problem is." We can be committed to things we love to do, goals in a sport, our education, or a career, but the most important commitment is to the Creator and the people He put in our lives. But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." For more information about this and other stories by the storyteller, go to www.joeystory.com.